Welcome this morning to the Sport and Rec Committee meeting. This is the last meeting for the term. We've got a few items, not too many, a couple of meaty ones, but just there's a comment, a quick meeting is a good meeting, which is not untrue. I know, that's what I'm saying, repeating the good wise words of a fellow councillor McGurk. So we've got this, and then we've got a workshop which we'll go straight through. I'm probably aiming for at least before midday, 11 o'clock, 10:30 even. But we've also got a joint committee meeting also, I believe, at 1:30. So we just need to keep it moving. So I just do like to put some. We've got an apology from Madam Mayor Rees, just for lateness. I believe she'll be on a bit later on this morning. Can I have someone move that? Moved by Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor McGurk. Order of business as tabled. Sorry? Move it? Okay. You're moving the minutes. We'll get to the minutes yet. Updates to the interest register. I assume there's no conflicts or so forth, but please just raise your hand if you think there is. Or feel welcome to step out of the table. Public forum, no public forum. Confirmation of minutes, pages 7 to 10. I think this is where you jump in there, Councillor McGurk. Have someone second that? Second by Councillor Walker. Chairman's report, which is pages 11 to 12. It's a fairly brief one. I'll take that as being read. I will make a quick comment on that just to sum it up. It was in regards to we've had some great input from the annual plan, which might be a little while back, but you will recall we had a lady come in or speak about the Riverside Pool and brought up some good points, and it is. So we went down there with staff, and myself had gone down there to have a check, and just in general down there with a safety check. And the place is an ageing facility, as you know, but I'm very impressed by CLM who run it very professionally. And as things do wear and tear, they need a bit of upkeep, but they were already onto that prior to the letter of info. But the nice thing there was the feedback we got, which I will read from Kay Waller, who originally raised the concerns. I'll read that as: those of us that use Riverside Pool aqua classes are thrilled with the improvement in the dressing rooms. I've just returned from a 9-week overseas trip and went to a pool today for the first time since the clean-up, and it is incredible. On behalf of the Aqua Group, we would like to thank the Council for their speedy action on the facilities. Kind regards, Kay. So that was from generally in terms of the showers and the changing rooms in there, and they were due, and they're looking very smart. Any questions in regards to the Chairman's report? Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Walker. Someone seconded. Councillor Delberg. That brings us on to the committee quarterly report, such as pages 13. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Paul. And you'll have in front of you, I see you already have in front of you what may seem to repeat what's already in the report, but there's just been a couple of slight, maybe one slight adjustment to that, which I'll let Rosie and Paul speak to. Thank you.
Good morning, and through the chair I would just like to explain the two pieces of paper which have just been tabled there, which is a correction to the quarterly reporting key performance measures. Now, we've been having some issues with the modelling behind the GIS and trying to get really accurate results from those measures around the distance for playgrounds and around the distance for neighbourhood reserves. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to get that modelling to where we wanted to, so hence the late paper. But we are very confident about the play facilities, so we've changed that to achieved. The reason for that is it's 95% playgrounds, because the measure was 97% last time, and a 2% drop would mean about 430 additional households had been built with more than 1,000 metres from a playground. So we know that this is really unlikely. And there's only been about 300 new households built per year. And so for this reasoning, we feel very confident that we can say that the play facilities are achieved. We haven't got that same level of confidence around the distance for the neighbourhood parks because we've moved that to 99%. Also, in terms of the acquisition and the distance for neighbourhood parks, is very much a timing issue between when the developer releases a new area and we develop it versus new sections. So our GIS department are taking this really diligently and doing a whole lot of work trying to get that model backed up. We will have this information for the annual report. So while we feel reasonably confident, there will be some ebbs and flows in that measure, depending on the timing of subdivisions, depending on the timing of our ability to develop that reserve. So hence, we're just being a bit conservative and leaving that on track, but we do have a high level of confidence around the play facilities. So hence, we've changed that from what was in the original report. And just as a bit of a summary for the report, I just want to outline that the budgets that we have or have been able to achieve or have not been able to achieve, and there's various reasons around this ability to stay on the budget. And by far the greatest contributing factor is the Reserves Development Program and the General Reserves Land Purchase Program, which is really directly related back to that subdivision again. So we're very reliant on the developer and the timing of those. So that's a big chunk of the program that might look like it's been underachieved, but we're really reliant on where that developer's at. A couple of the other projects that we've been reporting on throughout the year, so I hope that you're aware of it, is the Great Taste Trail project. There's been delays around that. There's also been some project savings, which is always good news, and primarily the Saxon Hockey as well. There's also some funding in there for some forestry block funding, sits within our Grampians park land. So they're the main deviations around that delivery of the capital program. But Paul and I are really happy to take any questions regarding the quarterly report.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Paul. I want to comment.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I've just got one small correction as well on page 20. Paragraph 5.2, there's two references to the Great Taste Trail reinstatement. That should say the Dun Trail, just for the record. So it's paragraph 5.2.
Oh, yeah.
Just point of clarification, so where it says Great Taste Trail reinstatement is actually the Dun Mountain Trail.
Correct, that's the section where the slip has occurred just below the dam.
Councillor Courtney, Councillor Walker, Councillor McGurk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Rosie and Paul. I'm looking at 4.2 on page 14, where you talk about the Sea Sports building at the marina. And you say a business case is being revised. Now, I'd like some more detail on that to confirm the benefits and costs of the concept design received from Sea Sports Group. And then you go on to say the previous preferred option of a new purpose design building has been costed at 5.4 million, which is believed to be beyond the achievable budget. So where are we going with this? Does this mean that it's on hold in the meantime, or are you looking at adapting a building rather than building a new one?
So through the chair, I'd like to Jane to answer that because she's been directly consulting with the Sea Sports users.
Yes, so through the chair, we met with the Sea Sports Group just within the last couple of weeks. So originally we had a design prepared, as you say, that cost 5.4 million, and we discussed that with the groups, and they would prefer a scaled back version of a building. And so most recently we've talked to them about using the existing building for the existing users and improving the Totally Boating building as a boat storage facility. And at this stage we're costing up those options to see what that would involve.
Thank you for through Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. And you'd see a lesser cost, of course. You don't anticipate what that might be. You couldn't. Was it too difficult a question to ask at this early stage?
Yes, through the chair, we don't yet have the costed option for that new design.
Another follow-up, not on that matter, but on 4.8, the Marina hard stand. There are businesses being operated down there, and the feedback I'm getting is that we could sharpen our communication with them on what's happening, how long the maintenance work in respect to the hard stand is going to take, when it's going to happen. There have been some quite considerable delays, I've been told. So can you give these people assurances that they will be updated, they will be kept informed on when they're going to have stop work so that other sealing, surfacing can be done?
Through the chair, yes. There has been a meeting with all of the user groups of the hard stand taken by the capital projects and the project manager for that, giving everybody an update. And we're working regularly with the Marina Advisory Group almost daily and giving them updates about where that project's at. So, yes.
Thank you, and I've got Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Trafalgar Centre use, I see that we've increased the attendance 54%, that's the replacement page 39 there. Is there anything else that we can do? Because we've spent an awful lot of money on that, that building, and is there a particular reason why we're not getting the use out of it that we might? Is it the fees, or is it just the events not coming round, or?
I can quickly answer, and I'll go first. That's gone up, because you recall it was closed for a period of time when we were doing the restructuring of it. So when we hit the ground running, I believe, or we did hit the ground running, but so there's been a takes a little time, and it's a vast improvement. So it's still hitting that 10 and 20% target. So we're on target, but and the bookings coming forward are looking very promising. So from my perspective, I think we've made some great gains there. But I'll let...
Through the chair, I was just going to add, we've got a workshop following on from this meeting on exactly that subject, and not wanting to stifle the discussion now, but we've got a PowerPoint which will take the councillors through exactly where the Trafalgar Centre is at, how it's performing, and a couple of thoughts on future marketing. So we'll be...
Yeah, that'd be good for input from the whole council on that committee. Thank you, Anne. You want to speak? Rosie, were you about to say something on that, was it? No, thank you. I've got any more questions there, Councillor Walker? I've got McGurk, Barker, Dalberg and Fulton. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, through you, Mr Chair. A couple of questions. I want to go back to the Seasport building to begin with, 4.2, and take cognizance of the responses to Councillor Courtney. So I'm clear is that at the moment the Seasport building, or what's been proposed, is around about 5.4 million. You've gone back to the groups down there, says that's beyond their capacity to deliver, because it was going to be, I think we was understanding it's going to be sort of a shared expense. I'm just wondering, what's the issue is that of, the typical Nelson response to something is we compromise, cut back, and then we end up with a product that fails to meet anyone's realistic needs. So we're actually back to trying to reinvest, into something that we really do need. Does that feature in the thinking at all? What I'm concerned about is with scale back, we end up with a result that barely meets requirements and is pretty much unsatisfactory because we've just cut. And we've got plenty of examples over history that illustrate that point. Where are we at with that? Is it better to increase the budget, or look for other options for funding for getting a project that actually delivers what is wanted?
So through the chair, in response to that, that's really, those issues will be addressed through the business case. So the business case is quite a robust process at looking at all of those options and reassessing it. We will certainly be taking that what avenue they want to progress in terms of being financially viable for them to be able to do their percentage of fundraising as well. So the concerns that you bring up are really real and will certainly be at the forefront of our minds when we're going through that business case process.
Next one, back to 4.8 that again Councillor Courtney raised about the hard stand. If I'm thinking, this overlaps a bit of other ones, I'm thinking more about marine biosecurity in terms of cleaning pests off marine craft, and the biggest risk is recreational craft in our marina transferring, pests, Sabella, Mediterranean fanworm, out to our. What kind of connection are we having with the environmental programs team and the biosecurity team in terms of what's required there? Because there's enough capacity, but it's actually making it efficient.
So through the chair to answer that one again, you're pretty spot on exactly where our process is at the moment. So in that re-evaluation of the hard stand project of stage 2, there is certainly investigation into biosecurity values and the requirements of the hard stand to be able to meet that biofouling cleaning requirement. So we're working with the environmental team. Richard Fazal is working closely with the project manager and also the Top of the South Biosecurity, which is made up of Tasman District Council and Nelson. So there's been a couple of reports commissioned on those requirements, so they are now being incorporated into that design for stage 2.
Has there been any consideration about including in the marina charges a cost for the biosecurity and anti-fouling measures? Because what happens, everyone wants their boat cleaned at the same time, probably about late spring before they go out in the summer, and there's not the capacity to deliver it. But if we can actually stage the work over the course of the year, so the thing is being used, basically the asset's being sweated, it's being used all the time, rather than what happens now, everyone wants the boat cleaned at the same time, can't be cleaned, so they put it into the water without. Give me a response.
So I was talking to the chair of the Marina Advisory Group about this just late last week, and yes, everyone wants their boats cleaned November, December, and if we had to provide a hard stand big enough to cope with all of that, it would be huge. But if the boats were cleaned on a roster once a year through the year, then something around about an 18-berth hard stand would be more than adequate for that purpose. So part of our process has to be to work with the Marina Advisory Group to make clear our expectations that we cannot provide a facility where everyone cleans their boat late spring, early summer.
Can I carry on? I've got a few more questions. 5 point...
Go one more and I'll come back.
Yeah, right.
I'll just take a comment. There's pages 32 and 35 for those who want a little bit more on the hard stand and the water sports building, a little bit of a breakdown of the budget, etc.
I'm looking at, I think, you answered 5.3, 5.8, I think it is, paragraph. I've dealt with that one. No, I'll leave it at that for the time.
Sure, I can come back on that. Councillor Barker, Dalberg, Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 2 areas of inquiry. The first one, it's a question arising about the accuracy of what's on page 15, and it's a simple thing. If only those figures were correct, it would be very nice, but they're all in millions. There should be 3 zeros at the top to show that the actual expenditure. Do you know what I'm doing in the presentation? That can be corrected for this official document.
I see what you're saying, yep. So rather than just assume that they're in the millions.
If the rate income from
Noted.
for Parks and Recreation was only $12,600, it would be wonderful.
Fair enough.
And the expenditure was to likewise in that area.
So noted there.
So it's not accurate.
Put a footnote.
Okay. Now the second one is relating to the marina. Section 5.8. You see, we're in the red in terms of income, but we're even in the red greater for expenditure. And I would like to know, as stated in section 8.3 of the report on page 23, when will this revaluation take place so that we will be charging a full and proper depreciation charge, which will go towards making this a more, in terms of the ratepayers' investment, a profitable business. At the moment, it's not being charged a proper depreciation charge, in my view, and it's stated the revaluation is going to take place. When is it going to start?
I might offer a comment. Thank you, through the chair, and unless Rosie's got some better information, my understanding is our finance team are looking into the revaluation. We have picked up that is something that needs to be done. They're progressing that. Council sets the fees and charges for the marina on an annual basis. My understanding is that piece of work will feed into that consideration by this committee or its successor to set the fees and charges for the following financial year. If we can do something before that, I'd be happy, but we are waiting on that advice to come through from the finance team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For me, it's a priority. The fees and charges are not where they ideally should be in terms of the actual cost of having that marina, which includes the cost of depreciating the asset. So
I understand
as soon as that revaluation takes place, the better.
Sorry, I understand, yeah, that is being taking place, talking about the revaluation of the assets and maybe building a depreciation. It might be a staged effort. So that is something we are...
Once you've done that process, then you know what the true cost of having a marina is, including its
totally
depreciation.
Thank you, Councillor Barker.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Page 14, 4.5 Mountain Dun Bike Hub says in the information we presented at the committee. Is that happening today, or is someone going to tell us about that?
Through the chair, this is paragraph 4.5, is that correct?
Yes.
So the Maitai Mountain Bike Hub is a project that we have quite a few steps to go through, and we're mindful, and we have a concept design drawn up already. We want to take that back to Ngāti Koata, and then following that we'll be confirming those concepts through committee. So it would probably be the first committee of the next term. So it's not today.
Okay, well, maybe that should have stated that in there because I was expecting an update. That's okay, I'm comfortable. The next thing then, a bit disappointed might I say, but comfortable. Marina hard scenes. If I take that, I know it's a hot topic, but it's also one of our gems really that we aren't kind of using enough. 4.8. I'm interested in the second part of that paragraph. This may result in additional costs which are partially compensated by deferring further work in stage 2 of the launching ramp or reducing number of hard bays. My question really is, can you explain that and why are we not getting the work done on the launching ramp?
Through the chair, the launch ramp stage 1 was completed. We had further money to do a stage 2 of the launching ramp, which in 1920 was purely design and, if needed, construction in the following year. So we are proposing that if the hard stand was to need further funding in 2019-20, we could use or consider some of the funding from the launch ramp for it.
So the follow-up question to that one would be, how much money do we need? And I'm kind of thinking that the launch ramp is totally separate from the hard scenes. And I'm kind of thinking, why are we not following on that very good stage 1 project and following it up? So number one is, how much money are we going to defer? And my question is, why? Because I myself would like that stage 2 following its timelines.
So, Mr. Chair, with your blessing, so there's some, we have to extend the hard stand sealed area. We're working on the design of that. in terms of make sure it's fit for purpose, can carry the weight of the travel lift, etc. That design hasn't been finalised. We won't know the cost of the ceiling until we do that. But also, then when you increase the surface area discharging into the filtration system, that has to be upgraded to meet standards, and we need a new resource consent for that. And we'll probably need that resource consent before we, we need to be sure we can get that resource consent before we start directing more areas of surface discharging into that filtration system. So there's quite a bit to go there in terms of knowing what those costs are. Now, if those costs, there's two options available to us. One is we come back to the council and ask for more money once we know what those costs are, or we divert some money out of the launching ramp. But we won't know that. If it's just a little bit of money, we'd probably purloin it from the launching ramp budget. If it's a lot, then we'd probably come back to the council and ask for more money. But we don't know that yet. We're still working on that design. And on the design of the filter, and starting to gear up to apply for the resource consent.
So, following up on that, the hard sands I note on page 32, middle of the page, biosecurity partners have an expectation that 12 anti-fouling work bays are supplied. It's sort of the first time I've really heard of that, but I think it's a great idea. So what sort of money are we talking? Or is that actually in our budgets?
So what was that for, Councillor Delby? That was...
That's page 32.
Yep.
So it's Marina Hard Sands, it's in the middle of the page.
The line you said... Oh,
So
yeah.
it's in the middle of the page, project issues.
Okay, thank you.
That's the first time I've heard of it, but it makes sense. There's 12 anti-fouling work bays. I'm assuming that's something to do with also the filtration, stopping it getting in the bay. So that's the first time. So my question is dollars, and is that money in our budget, or is that part of why we're struggling?
So through the chair to answer that, that's part of the design process that we're going through now. So waiting for that detailed design to come through so we can get those costings. So at this stage, the report's just flagging that there's a bit of unknown, but until we get that detailed design and those costings, we won't know for sure. So those 12 bays are certainly part of that detailed design.
Follow-up bit would be then the 4 that we've got done now, have they got this anti-fouling work bays provided? Or are we doing something else?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Cool. Okay, that's good. And then I had another one in here with page 21, 5.8, again, the marina. I just noticed the 5.8, refuge collection costs are over budget due to contamination. Can we explain that a bit more?
So through the chair, what we were finding down at the marina is that we had recycling services down there and it was constantly being contaminated with normal rubbish. So we were paying an awful lot for waste management down there. We'd need to separate out the recycling from the normal, so our costs certainly went up. So for now, the recycling has been put on hold and staff are doing investigations, looking at options, how we can better manage that recycling and getting some costings around that. So it would be a dedicated site for recycling that would only be permissible to the berth holders. So we are finding a lot of people are going down there and just dumping their household waste. We've found televisions and all sorts within the recycling bins. So we're looking at a system that we can dedicate purely to recycling and then purely for rubbish for the berth holders.
Okay, just to follow up there, Mr Chair, and just feedback, because I'm on the Joint Minimisation Waste Management TDC and Nelson City Council, they found the same thing. So maybe you go and talk to TDC, they had that same problem back in 80% contamination. So basically they had to move it somewhere where follow lights and security almost to get it done. So maybe rather than reinvent the wheel, ask that group. Thanks.
Councillor Fulton, Courtney, Barker.
Thank you, through the chair. Look, I have a couple of questions. My first question is around section 5.5, where it talks about the sports park expenditure being greater than budget of 263,000. So in terms of that overspend, you note that the All Blacks game and Bay Dreams had a significant cost. Have we had those costings provided to us? Like, how much did Bay Dreams cost the council?
So through the chair, yes, the Bay Dreams event was reported back, including the budget, in a report, I think, to this committee in its last meeting. It came inside the $80,000 budget for direct costs, except for internal staff costs, which were additional.
And have we got that costing in terms of how many staff hours were spent on that?
Through the chair, it was covered in that report. We came up with an estimate based on an average hourly rate and gave a range.
Okay.
Yep, we did cover that quite a bit of depth at the time.
I just think it's important moving forward that we look at that for the future Bay Dreams. That I think the Bay Dreams is a great event to bring to the city, but I don't believe council should be subsidising it to the same degree that we did this time. And also having awareness of how much staff time is spent on an event like that when there's actually other priorities which miss out.
Point taken, but we did, recall we covered it in quite a healthy discussion in regards also with the Community Services Committee and ourselves on that.
It's just come back, it's quite a lot of money, 263,000 greater than budget in terms of our sports parks. You know, sort of, I presume next time we'll have our budgets more accurate, predicting that will happen again, but it's quite a significant amount. In terms of 5.11, the Brook Camp expenditure is also greater than budget of 241,000. I'd like to know why it's so high, the cost of higher than budgeted costs.
So through the chair, the vast majority of that expenditure being greater than budget is assigned to unprogrammed service delivery, which had a zero budget, and that is the additional staff, so that's the 204,000. That there was no budget set for that, so that's the NELMAC, contracted NELMAC staff to be backup staff, also security and cleaning services.
So how did we have nothing budgeted to begin with? I mean, presumably the Brook had some associated cost predicted. So how did we get that so wrong in terms of over budget?
So through the chair, in answer to that, there is certainly an element of additional expenses because of the additional income. So the Brook has been consistently getting busier, and so along with that have come additional costs in staff and cleaning and maintenance. So there has been a little bit of greater budget, so greater expenditure. Also historically, there hasn't been additional budget allocated for any more staff other than the camp manager. So while there has been an allocation to have staff and cleaning up there, it hasn't been budgeted to date. This has been rectified through the annual plan, so there is now budget going forward.
Okay, great, thank you. In terms of page 34 of our agenda, the city play space, and I will confess that I find sometimes, I think our quarterly reports are very, very helpful, but I sometimes find the layout, we have to sort of go from different sections to find information, and sometimes it's repeated throughout, so apologies if I've missed it in another section. But in terms of the city play space, I note that it's got a lovely green line of overall health and it's all progressing. Can you give me some, an update on how it is progressing? And
through the chair, possibly not the right person to answer that. I would have to come back to you. The project has been reallocated, if you like, to the city development team. So the green line there is reporting against the budgets, and it is fine. The budgets are spread over a number of years, and this year is an investigation year, so they're looking for a site. that's pretty much all I can say. I'd have to talk to Lisa's team and come back to you, because it's not sitting with us anymore.
So is the green line just around budget? I thought it was also around the fact that what does the overall health actually mean? Is it just budget, or is it in terms of progressing that project?
In terms of quality and time and budget. So it's just reporting that project, there's no alarm bells.
So does that mean that we have a site?
No, this is the investigation year for that project.
Okay. All right, I would like an update on how that's progressing. Maybe if Lisa at some stage could send me an email, I'd like to know if we have a site found and how that project's going to progress. And then finally, 4.5, going back to the Mai Tai mountain bike hub, which Councillor Dahlberg picked up on as well. Is that not in one of these, or maybe I've just missed it, is it in one of these 12 main projects as well? I would have thought we would have a bit more information on that, because it's quite a significant project. Could you find it?
Through the Chair, I don't think it meets the threshold for the budget in 1 year, but I can certainly give an update if you'd like.
Yeah, an update would be great.
So the project is in an investigation stage. We've had some concept designs drawn up, and we're very keen to bring Ngāti Koata with us. Essentially, this is a project that will build a car park and trailhead facilities right on the doorstep of somebody else's land. So we're really working closely with Ngāti Koata to ensure that they're on board with it. Following that, we will be needing to take it to iwi, potentially resource consent, and then wider stakeholder engagement as well. So we do have quite a bit of work to do, but it's in the stage it's at the moment. We're envisaging we'll be able to bring more information back to the first committee of the next term, and that will be for a sign-off on a concept design and various parameters. So the budget is in this financial year to build it. We're not expecting it to be as big as originally envisaged. The Mountain Bike Club have advised that they will not need it as a focal point for their big event in 2020. Probably our biggest driver, 2021, our biggest driver is probably to relieve some of the pressure in the brook, and that's dependent on more trails coming down into the Mai Tai. Currently, if we built one there tomorrow, a lot of people potentially wouldn't use it because the trails exit in the brook, so they want to have their cars there. So the club has a number of trails proposed to come down Fringe Hill into the Mai Tai, for example, so it should tie in quite nicely with that. So I would say, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and just to follow on from Councillor Fulton in regards to the playground location, with Rutherford Park, there's been some great responses with that natural setup on there. I've just even pinged up just individually, but even through the old Facebook, people really loving it. I'm not sure if other people, the logs, etc. are going off.
Yeah, I've been really surprised at the amount of adults on it as well.
Oh, very good.
Parents running around after their children, it's been a really good outcome.
Oh, thank you. I've got Councillor Courtney and Councillor Barker.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Jane, I think. I'm going back to the marina just for a moment, and I want to know whether our management team are looking beyond now and tomorrow and the next day and looking to the future regarding a strategy for our marina. Is that part of your thinking? I mean, out of the discussion and the questions this morning, I just sort of feel that we need, the time is right, I think, to be looking at a strategy going forward. It's a wonderful opportunity, as you're probably fully aware of, and it could be so much better. That's the view of the people that use it and frequent it there, and so I'm talking more, Mr. Chair, about management of it and establishment of a trust or something like that that can stand apart from council. Have you got any thinking on that?
Through the Chair, perhaps I can just offer a comment. Yes, the future of the marina and its strategic direction is something that we're actively thinking about at the moment at a number of levels. We've already talked in the committee this morning about the hard stand and the ramp and the Sea Sports building and a number of other features. Internally, we've convened a group that has started meeting. We're wanting to pull together the different parts of council's teams and our thinking around a more cohesive approach to our thinking and action as internally. And as Rosie has already indicated, we're talking regularly to the Marina Advisory Group about their aspirations and where they see things going. And we know that they are working towards some specific ideas that they want to put to us. So I don't want to preempt that. That's a little bit in their hands, but we're also wanting to make sure that we've got all of our teams and our previous thinking sort of lined up and heading in the right direction. So I don't have any answers for you at the moment, but it is something that we're actively working on, and I think we'll be coming back to this committee or its successor in the next training with some ideas. Thank you.
Pat, perhaps wants to comment here.
A quick follow-up. So the Marina Advisory Group have been charged with the responsibility of coming up with ideas, suggestions, recommendations in respect of the management of the marina. Is that what you're telling me? And you're waiting to receive that?
Through the chair, they have let us know that they wish to offer some advice on that topic, and that is a role that they've been asked to do. Those decisions, though, will be for the council.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add, so this actually comes back down to the hard stand design. I mean, if the marina was going to grow, if there were going to be more boats, then your hard stand will need to be bigger, which means the filtration system will need to be bigger, either built that way or the ability to have clip-ons, which means the resource consent ideally should address that growth. You don't want to be going back every 3 or 4 years for a variation. That's expensive and time-consuming. So this is important to us. And similarly, if we were going to, if there was going to be some other sort of way of managing the marina separate from the council, you'll need to decide which land the council is going to say is marina land and which land is not marina land. So again, we need this strategy, this master plan. It's starting to become quite, well, it's important to us to get this resolved, working with the Marina Advisory Group, so we can bring it back to council to say, yes, this is where we want to go.
Oh, that's good news. So there's a master plan in the formation stages.
Yes, in the very formation stages, Councillor, yes.
Councillor Courtney, I'll get you to use your microphone on this, and I'm waiting in
Point 4, I found this place, and it's going to Rosie or Paul, because this is exciting, and I'll tell you why. It's the skate ramp has been installed at Marsden Recreation Reserve in Stoke. Now that's the green space, the park next to the Stoke Hall. A lot of people don't know what that is named as, so that's what it is, isn't it? And you say here this is the first step in development of the youth facility for Stoke. And that's what gets me excited, and I'm telling you, it's going to get the people of Stoke excited too. So, could you tell us what the second step might be, or the third step, or the fourth step, or are there any other steps beyond the first? And how far away are they?
So, through the chair, in response to that question, we're really working closely with the Spotlight on Stoke group and various other groups within Stoke. So there are lots of projects on the table, and we're wanting to get alignment with those projects. And they're all interrelated, and they all have flow-on effect to each other. So I think it's really important that we continue to work through that group and the community partnerships team to get an understanding of the influence of one project over another. So we're all aware of the library project and potentially looking at where the best place for reinvestment in the library is. There's also the Stoke Seniors Hall that we're working with youth groups, the community partnerships. So there's a lot going on, but working through the Spotlight on Stoke to come with a more sort of coordinated approach to answering some of those. So next steps, we're waiting to hear back from those groups about what they consider as the next step for Stoke.
Could you allow me a follow-on? A wonderful partnership was established when constructing the skate ramp at Tahunanui beach with the volunteers and the community, there was a will there. Could you bring them into the fold as well and get them to play a part?
I'll briefly answer it first. Yeah, that's been a great project and it's set the bar high. And talking to the good people that put that together, when I mentioned what we're doing out at Stoke, or intending to do out at Stoke, they said yes, they'd be gladly involved in that, but I'll let staff answer that further.
Through the chair, I think the chair has more knowledge of it than I do, but yep, most certainly it's a great opportunity. When we've got those partnering opportunities to get a better outcome for the community, we want to work with them.
Another follow-up and then I'll finish, but it is important, and it's particularly important to the youth of Stoke because they've been waiting since about 2010 when a plan was first put in place. Have you got a plan? Is there a concept there that you're following?
Through the chair, I'd need to check in with the Spotlight on Stoke group to see where they're at with that. I'm not sure if our GM has any more information on where they're at with that master planning.
Through the chair, no, sorry, I haven't been involved in that one directly.
There's not the urgency, I don't sense the urgency there that I would like to feel, but...
I understand, I totally agree with Councillor Courtney, but I do recall over the last number of years with the Green Meadows, we were waiting to see how that played out and how it was utilised before we took another step on that. So we have indicated money aside for moving ahead on that, and I'll let Rosie.
Through the chair, just to add to that, to give you a response, the community services, so community partnerships are reporting through their quarterly report next week, so we'll make sure that we've got some information to update through the community partnerships quarterly report.
But yeah, your excitement and keenness is shared by staff and council on that.
I sense that in Rosie's voice.
Yeah, thank you. I'll move, and I'm just conscious of time. We're covering some good stuff, but I'm conscious that we keep moving there. And while we're talking about youth, I hadn't had the opportunity, I missed the opportunity to introduce our youth councillors, Holly and Layla. It's and they're actually old hands at this council table. You've been 4 times, was it, Holly? And 2 times Layla. But have you guys had a chance to check out the skate ramp at Tahuna or
Yeah, I have actually seen the skate ramp at Tahuna and it is being well utilised.
Definitely, and I saw a whole lot of the old, when I say oldies, a lot of dads were going down there and reliving their youth, put it that way, but they were even more grinning when their kids were sliding down and falling on their faces. I'm not sure if the mums were so happy when they got home, but probably the dads were more bruised, but no, there's big grins all around. Thank you. I've got on the list is Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to drill down a little bit into our capital expenditure variances on page 22. Page 22, Saxon's Field is a significant variance there, but I want to know who I can congratulate on getting that contract through. It's so much less than anticipated for the hockey turf renewal. That was a very good achievement.
Through the chair, I can't take any congratulations for that, but the budget was set with quite a considerable contingency for drainage work because we had to check we had to get CCTV in there. That could have been very expensive if the drainage wasn't functioning properly. We also had prepared for a replacement shock pad as well, so there was a lot of contingency in there that was built into the budget that wasn't used. So
okay, yeah, the contingency I always wonder about when we establish our budgets. Contingencies, they can be dangerous.
But
anyway, it's good news in this
one's been a good news, and I also believe with the athletics track, similar situation there.
But the second one is not such a good news one, and that's the neighbourhood parks variance. You see there, it's something like $600,000. Page 22, the capital expenditure chart. Thank you. It's got the 2 major variances there.
So
the neighbourhood parks one is, as I said, quite considerable. The comment in the report is the budget is directly related to subdivision construction, so timing is not within council's control. What subdivisions are not happening that we anticipated would happen?
when we set the budgets in the asset management plan through the chair, we set them basically on an average in the past. In the case of subdivision budgets, which are, there's roughly three, I think, budgets that come from development contributions. There's a playground development one, there's a land purchase one, and there's a reserves development one. We have really no control over when the developer is going to complete that development and when he's going to apply for Section 224, and we invoice for development contributions. So some years that budget's going to be extraordinarily over budget, and other years it's going to be well under budget. And this is a year that we didn't, in the last financial year, we didn't make any significant land purchases, and there was, and it's just the way it is. I mean, it's one of those budgets that we just don't have control over.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that information. I wonder whether this is a lack of growth in our city and the anticipated housing and development and subdivision that we anticipated is not happening. Is it
I think it's
an indication at all?
But I'll let Paul answer it. My understanding is that it's probably unfair to see it making it look like we're not doing the work that we need to be doing. It's quite the opposite, that as those allowances, allocations come through, and then as they need to be built, it's not a stepped project. It's something as they come in and as they go out, as Paul mentioned. So I think sometimes it looks a bit unfair because it looks like we're not doing the work. It's quite the opposite. It's something you're not building them on a regular basis. It's sort of as they come and as you need and as they get developed.
Tends to come in lurches, and
Good work.
there's an account that receives development contributions that kind of sits below this, and those budgets are just set from what we might expect. But an example from this year is we were really expecting to construct a walkway through Montebello Reserve last year, which was $200,000. That hasn't happened. We're carrying forward, requesting to carry forward that money, but really it's funded from development contributions and drawn from another account anyway. So it's an unusual one, those ones.
It's not coming out of ratepayer. It's not coming in and out of ratepayer.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, but my concern is largely around the fact that we put into our annual plan and our long-term plans things that we're going to do and things that we're going to expend ratepayers' money, and we take the money off them from rates to do these things, and it's always a concern when capital expenditure is not.
This one, to be fair, is not coming out of rates. This is coming out of developers, so it's not. It's not a commitment we've taken out of rates and then go, well, sorry, we haven't spent it. We've over put a hand out for it. It's actually what's coming in from the developers, so it has no effect.
No effect on rates, but it's still, nevertheless, it's something we said we would be doing.
That is correct, but you're right. It's not coming out of rates, and it's not borrowed either. It's coming from development contributions.
No thing. But I like your terminology, financial terminology, lurches. Oh, hang on to that, let's go on. Cheers. No, I thought I explained it very well because it is something which comes in and out, and it doesn't come in and out of ratepayer. Quite the opposite. It's a bit unfair to have it under this chart, but it gives complete transparency to what's happening. I think I've got welcome Councillor Noonan, I've got Councillor Noonan, then Councillor Delberg, but I would like to wrap this up unless some really urgent information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. It looks like I came in at a time and place. The Stoke, spotlight on Stoke work, just as an explanation, is that work was quite solid, and then it stopped. It was prioritised off, unfortunately. So some of this stuff, it's going to have to be reinstated so that we can actually have some of this work happen. It did sort of stymie things a little bit. The skate ramp at Stoke, that came out of a community services workshop where we said, look, can we do something? And the staff said, yes, I think we can do something. So credit to the staff, they went away and got that little skate ramp up and running. So credit to the staff for doing that. And that was just the beginning of something. That there is a crossover between our two committees, as you're aware. And so that work is happening, and Whanaka youth are being involved, and there are other youth people dealing with youth in the community that our staff are working with. And we've got a consultant. So when you read the community services agenda, you will see some of the work is explained, and then I've just got the draft of that to bring back today. So that meeting is next week, I think. So some of the answers to the questions that have been asked today might be answered at that point in time.
Yes,
I just wanted to explain.
Thank you for it. I thought it actually was a topic we'd covered a number of times quite well in going forward, and where we were putting pauses. But I had a look at that ramp last night. Actually, I was out Green Meadows Way, and it's looking well used. It was looking like it'd been there forever already. It's being well used, that small ramp, but it'd be
Really
nice
good
to
to
see something
hear.
added to that. I've got Councillor... Okay. Councillor Delberg had a quick...
Question, your page 24 and Waitakere Golf Club. The question was, we tried a new management group plan and seems to be working well with a 30% increase in users and players. Can you give us an update on that? Where are we there and how's that going for their next, whatever it is, contract or whatever that group does to manage it?
Through the chair, I could get more detailed information for you. They've just presented to us their annual plan with detailed accounts and detailed numbers of patronage and players and where they're at in relation to the KPIs from that contract. I just don't have that on me now, but we've certainly seen an improvement and an increase in their numbers and an increase in their income from players up there.
Just happy that went well, Mr Chair, because we did the...
Just to add to that, Roger and I are going to head out there in a few weeks' time, already scheduled, in regards to some commentary.
I didn't notice that.
And working well with the organisation out there.
So the last question would be page 38 in the reserve management plan. And it sort of mentions 2015 and previous work included. So what is the timeline for that to happen?
Through the chair, sorry, I'd need to go away and find some information on that timeline. It's been managed through the policy team, so I just need to check in with them to better understand that classification process and what the timing around that is.
So I note it's flagged as red and the overall health's red, and I imagine a reserve management plan is very useful. So yes, I would want an update on that, thanks.
To that, and I think that's due to that Green Meadows a bit where we, as a committee, decided to hold off on the classification of that small section where the parking, etc. was. Thank you for that. I've got, the recommendation has been moved by Barkle and seconded by Fulton. One quick question for Fulton, then McGurk.
I just have a quick question.
Oh, she did that.
I had my hand up. Sorry.
Well, just quickly, I do want to close up on this.
I just had one more quick question in terms of the skate ramp at Tahuna, which I can see is being used heaps and it's fantastic. I know in the report in 8.5, page 24, that the Arts Council is planning a project for the ramp. Can you just update us on that and the progress of that? Because I did notice it had been tagged. I think that the faster we get artwork up, the less likely there is for tagging, because I noticed that only the ramp had been tagged, not the artwork around it.
Through the chair, sorry, I didn't quite get the question. Are you asking specifically about the Art Council's project?
So it says that, I'm just wondering, I asked a while ago about whether the ramp was going to be painted. So there's quite a lot of bare timber. And I'd suggested that maybe it was a youth council project, but I see it says that it sounds like the Arts Council is planning a project there. So I'd just like to be updated on what the plans are in terms of getting some artwork onto that ramp.
So through the chair, that will be another good one for us to bring back through the Community Partnerships quarterly report next week.
Okay, and just in terms of future, I mean, because I think that when we get these pieces of, like the skate ramps are really, it's amazing, but in terms of timing that piece of artwork onto it, I think it's quite important it happens quite quickly, because that's obviously what's happened down at Tahuna. There was some tagging which could have been avoided, and I think that the art brings in that creative community part to our sports. It's really important that we bring the artwork in as fast as we can.
Good point. Now, Councillor McGurk, thank you for the patience.
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm just looking at paragraph 5.1 and also the modified agenda that's called a reporting spreadsheet. The GIS model unavailable, this is in terms of parks and neighbourhood parks and play equipment. When's the GIS mapping model be available?
Through the chair, look, we're hoping to have it available within a month or so. It's the one that calculates the percentage of residential properties that are within 1,000 metres walk of a playground and 800 metres walk of green space.
Are you likely to doing a review of the type and placement of equipment in neighbourhood parks? Because as neighbourhoods change and older, the needs need to probably reflect that neighbourhood. Is that done, that work done?
Through the chair, yes, when we prepare our asset management plans, we look at the demographics, and specifically when a new neighbourhood comes on stream and a new reserve comes on stream, we will look at the demographics of that neighbourhood when we build a playground, and we often go out to the community whenever we can to ask them, have a barbecue and just sort of get a gauge on the type of people that are there, whether they're teenagers or predominantly younger. Yeah. But through the asset management plan is the main vehicle for looking at the types.
I get it for new neighbourhoods. What about existing neighbourhoods?
As we renew them, there's a sort of a mini policy in the asset management plan that says that we'll assess the whole playground when one bit of equipment needs renewing, and if that's all traditional equipment, we might install a modern one or a natural one, or vice versa. So there's a bit of an imperative for us to increase the diversity in playgrounds of equipment.
Okay, thanks for sharing.
Thank you. I won't take any more questions there. We've had a good run 3 times round there. But I've got Mr. Tregurtha. Did you have something you wanted to cover? Was that the reserve management plan? Or was that?
Yeah, so through the chair, I just caught part of the question regarding reserve management plan. So I sort of coming down here, but I wasn't entirely sure what the question was. So I'm here to answer anything on the reserve management planning process.
Yeah, but was there anything, I remember your question, that was in regards to the timeline of that, and it was in regards to, Green Meadows is the only area we haven't classified, but that was something as a committee we'd consciously decided to hold off till we lined up a few other ducks. I'm not sure if I can add any more to that.
No, the question was really on the reserve management plan. Sports grounds commenced in 2015. We're taking that pre-works work included. My question was, what is the timeline for this red flag reserve management plan?
Right, so through the chair, the next steps for the sports ground reserve management plan is just to complete the work on the classification of that the Green Meadows land. We're wanting to get that underway before Christmas, and then in the new year come back to the full reserve management plan.
Thank you for that. So just to go back, we've just reminded staff we've moved and seconded, moved by Barker, seconded by Fulton. Someone want to put? No, I didn't think so. No. I'll put it. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you. That takes us on to the next topic, which is the council, pages 40 to 52, council facilities venue hire fund criteria. Thank you. So I'll take it as read, but I'll let you speak to that. Was anything that needs clarification or?
Good morning, councillors, and through the chair. Just present the criteria to administer the $30,000 facilities venue hire fund. We'll take any questions.
Councillor Corney.
Region Development Agency, we haven't got a costing in here, because while we're talking about them administering the 30,000 to cover for any hire reductions that we give to various community organisations, there's nothing here about the cost to them. I'm interested in that. Has anything been done on that? Any work been done on that?
Through the chair,
We've rolled in this additional funding and additional process with the other work that we undertake for the events management. So there's now 3 parts to the work undertaken by the NRDA and staff for events management. There's the economic fund, the community fund and this fund. We undertake the work all within the same agenda and the same meeting. So it's a marginal cost for including this. There's no additional payment by council. As far as time is concerned, it's just a small extra amount of work required.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why couldn't we just continue and have our officers do that? Why, Gary, why couldn't you just continue? I mean, it seems a small amount of money. We've been doing it up until now. Why do we have to formalise this? I'm a little uneasy about it, being aware that, you know, events funding has been overspent by the NRDA previously, and we've had explanations for that, and we understand that. But my concern is we're loading another cost onto them, another operation onto them, and putting them under the microscope again. So why couldn't it stay in-house?
I'll let Roger answer initially.
Thank you through the chair. Look, it is a fair question. I think as Mark explained, we don't see it as adding a significant new task to the Economic Development Agency, and what we're doing is taking advantage of a mechanism that already exists for allocating money and for other purposes, and using that. Why couldn't we just carry on as we are? Our preference is to get this one above the line. So what we've noticed through the years is that we do get requests to discount the higher fee, especially at the Trafalgar Centre. Sometimes it's called sponsorship. And at the moment, we haven't previously had formal criteria. We haven't had what I would describe as a transparent process. So the council kindly allocated 30,000 in the annual plan, and what we're creating here is some criteria and a transparent process to get it above the line.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair, to a question to Officer Ball? Is this not a band-aid on a greater problem? Which, you know, as you know, problems you have. There are opportunities there, and I think there is the opportunity here to look at the whole management. There's a lot of resistance out there in the community about a firm in Auckland managing our Trafalgar Centre when it could be used in a much more efficient way, they feel, and promote big events to Nelson and shows, and as a lever to attract more people into the CBD. And so is there not a bigger issue here? Well, I'm saying there is actually a bigger issue here.
Thank you through the chair. The council facilities venue hire fund relates only to questions of council's charge for the venue hire. It does not relate to anything to do with CLM. Secondly, following this meeting, we have a workshop scheduled where we'll be taking you through a number of slides, the way the contract is set up and the pricing for there. Perhaps we can continue that theme in the workshop. But yeah, just to reconfirm, this fund is aimed only at council's venue hire charges.
Mr. Chair, why isn't in this graph here of the discounts we give, why haven't we put the Giants discount that we've given them for 2 years, where we dropped it? Our main tenant, our main hirer, the Giants, 84,000 was their annual hire charge. We dropped it down to about 25, didn't we, I think, from memory? Why isn't that sort of factored in here, that we keep that front of mind as well? Because I think we should have that in our minds as we go forward and look at these reductions in hire charges.
Joe, answer that.
Thank you through the chair. What we've listed here are the discounts that were approved by staff under the existing delegation, and which would in the future, had we had this fund, be covered by the fund. The Giants decision, well, the most recent one at least anyway, was taken directly to council. If we put that in, and obviously it was a decision taken to give it a discount or a sponsorship. There would certainly be many others involving other codes in other venues, and then we could go another level and talk about some of our arts and culture facilities as well. So what we're trying to do is keep the scope here to the discounts that were given for venue hire, and I think all of these were for the Trafalgar Centre, to illustrate that if this fund had existed last year, what applications would we have considered under this fund?
I think I've got Councillor McGurk and then Mayor Rees.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just turning myself to question 5, paragraph 5.6 on page 43 of the agenda. It's proposed that you divide the year into funding year into two. First half of fiscal year, second half of fiscal year. Has there been any thought given to actually splitting it seasonally or quarterly, so that we are maximising, if we've got a commercial? What I'm proposing is that dividing it seasonally or quarterly, so we can take into account the variations over the course of the year.
Just through the chair, considering the amount of money that was probably available, the 30,000, it was just considered to probably break that into two parts of the year rather than break it seasonally, which would have been, I think, would have been difficult to people to apply to the different sections of the year.
Okay, thanks for that. The next question I'd have would be, is there some criteria that we have if we've got a commercial client who wants the venue against a community one, thinking that there will be some peak demand where, as a commercial space, it's probably more valuable. Why would we give that away to a community space? There must be some other variation. Is there some criteria that we could apply, or do we make some kind of value judgment about commercial is more valuable than community, or community is more valuable than commercial?
Just through the chair, I mean, they do make those decisions, and that's up to the contractor to make the decisions to manage that appropriately, but if a community booking does get in, then they have to try and move a commercial booking around it. They do prefer to get the commercial booking, as you say, because it's actually worth more value, but it's just how they manage those bookings as they arrive. So they do try and work around that.
So I'll go back to my seasonal question again. Would you have an amount of space that would be available or budget across that 12-month period, or 6-month period, or 3-month period, or the season?
Sorry, Brian, so explain that, sorry.
I suppose what I'm looking at is that if you're doing a budget, so it's only $30,000 or whatever it is, at the moment I think it's 30, is it 30,000?
Yeah.
In terms of council budget, it's not a huge one, but it's probably more aggravating. But I'm just saying you divide that across the year in a proportion to expected demand. So what's it allocate? So what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to get at is that it's being used appropriately across the year. So it's not a time when, like, if you want to, what I'm trying to propose is if a commercial group comes and says, look, we've used up our allocation for this part of the year, if you'd like to move the event to another time when it's available, having a budget accordingly, or am I overcomplicating it?
Look, the allocation of that process will sit with the NRDA, and they will allocate appropriately across the year. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Madam Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Alsop. I'm just trying to sort of ascertain from the criteria here a few things. Yeah. So if we were looking at ineligible events, would something like a symposium or a seminar be considered to be a convention or a conference?
A symposium?
Or a seminar? For instance, I went to the Open Oceans Symposium that was held by Coulthron the other day, exchange of knowledge. Is that something that would be eligible or not eligible?
Through Chair, look, I think that every allocation of the fund would have to be by a case-by-case basis. So if there's any benefit, I suppose, and they met the criteria as benefit for the community or a wider benefit, then I think they would be considered.
Okay. Just a question in relation to 4.1 in the report at page 41, where we've got the breakdown of Trafalgar Centre discounts. I'm conscious that I've made a contribution from the Mayor's Fund for the Chamber of Commerce lunch with Prime Minister Ardern recently. So that would have been in, I'm not sure which financial year that was in. Okay, that was in the next financial year, so you've got that one captured as well. Because it certainly is, Mr Chair, something that comes very regularly into my requests is for getting access to the Trafalgar Centre and the costs being a prohibitive barrier to doing that. I'm just wondering in terms of the criteria, so if we're looking at 41, would All Blacks Hospitality be eligible with this criteria?
Through Chair, probably unlikely.
Unlikely. So it wouldn't be eligible. So it wasn't, so what you're telling us, was that funded through the events fund or not? Was that discount part of the package through the events fund or through the NRDA events fund or not?
No, through Chair, there was actually a discount provided through the facility at the time. There was quite a bit that actually went on with that booking, with the All Blacks booking, because what had actually happened is that the Tasman Rugby Union had provided packages to sell on behalf, which had an impact on the hospitality. It was at the point where it just about fell over because they weren't going to sell the tickets. They reduced the price to ensure that it actually happened, and it did happen.
Right, and so then if I'm looking again at some of these other ones, so can you just whip through those and go, based on the criteria that we've got, and apologies if that's somewhere buried in the report that I haven't found yet, what would get in and what wouldn't get in? So if you ran through that list there, based on the criteria, what's in and what's out?
Okay.
Most likely.
Through the Chair, so Rockter House, school event, likely. Church, we mentioned that through there, is pretty unlikely. 7 days is a commercial event, pretty unlikely. Hospitality, as we've mentioned, unlikely. Netball New Zealand, there is a criteria there to support sporting events, so possibly likely. NTCC is possibly likely as well. Institute Directors, I'm not too sure about that one. I'm not sure who they are actually. The Hollies, commercial ticketed event, probably unlikely. Jehovah's Witness, it's another religious event, probably unlikely. Mainland Netball, as a sporting event, it could possibly likely. Rockquest, school event, likely. Christian Congress, probably unlikely. And Pink Floyd would be unlikely because it's a commercial ticket event.
Okay, so just, I guess that's really helpful. Thank you, Mr. Alsop. So can you explain to me why the religious events have been, why there's decision to exclude those? What is it that makes them so unpalatable for a community?
I think just to clarify there, because I've had some discussions about if it was something a community thing, for example, if the Yannisbrook Church or Jehovah's Witnesses were doing like a 40-hour famine fundraiser, so it wasn't of a necessarily religious gain, then that would, I believe, that would come under the fund if it was something for a community, a fundraiser for something that's community bound. But I don't think it's signed off just because they're a church.
No, but Mr. Chair, I'm asking the question of presumably there's going to be a report going up to, there'll be some interaction between the officers and whoever's doing the decision making. So I'm asking the officer who's likely to be giving the advice, who's just told me that no to those ones is likely to be the scenario.
Yeah, my comment was it's not black and white, and I've had a similar discussion, and that was the feedback I got.
Yes, Richard, it isn't black and white, and you have to put in some eligibility criteria because you've got to make this fund, since there's only $30,000 available, reasonably tight. So the religious and political objectives fell under that ineligibility criteria. So, I mean, yeah, look, I don't know. You could make the criteria as wide as possible, but I think it'd go through pretty quickly. So that's why they're considered to be ineligible.
Thank you. Through the Chair, I might just offer a comment as well. We did talk about this one a lot for the reasons that you can imagine. There are a couple of considerations, and at the moment, what we're trying to do is align it with the approach in the Community Investment Fund, which takes a similar approach where if religious or faith-based organisations are requesting funding to promote their own religion, then that is less appealing for the community, wider community benefit than, let's say, the 40-hour famine example that the chairman used. I should add that this is criteria around discounting for the venue hire. Those organisations are probably still going to be eligible for the community rate, obviously. There are a few more words on page 51 in the criteria at the top of the page, if that helps.
Thank you. So more. So, having attended the Annesbrook event, which was Christmas in the City, it was designed to had carnival and other things outside to draw people into the city on a Sunday. Traction into the city. I'm kind of struggling to distinguish between that event and us funding the Centre Parade.
I'd say that I can't see a problem with that. That wouldn't be discounted from my point of view in discussions with staff on that. These are a list that have applied, and they are ones that would have, if there was a $30,000 fund at the time, these are the ones that may have been included. So as Gary or Mr. Alsop has put through, if you wanted a black and white description of that, he's gone yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But these are ones that would have been considered, and then from the...
Yep. Right, well, okay, I've just another couple of questions, and then I'm just got a comment to make, I think, around this one. Just in terms of the eligibility criteria, when we're looking at page 50, and we get to number 4, and it says the event should be financially accessible by a wide range of people. And I'm a huge supporter of the Chamber of Commerce, and so it's not around supporting that event or not, it's about whether the criteria are actually going to be complied with in terms of the officer recommendation. The tickets price to that event is quite high. In fact, it's out of the reach of most councillors who would have liked to have gone to Chamber of Commerce events, but they don't go because actually it's quite an expensive ticket, and they just on their income find that actually quite challenging. So I'm not quite sure how the officer recommendation aligns in terms of that particular matter. And what I'm saying in that is I think we should be providing support to the Chamber of Commerce. I think it's a critical partnership, which is why I provided mural funds towards the luncheon. It's a key relationship, and relationships are key to success. So, but I just don't see it aligning with the criteria. I wonder if Mr. Alsop could talk me through that as to how you reconciled that with the recommendation in the report.
Through the chair, the criteria is set so when you actually make an application, you wouldn't necessarily have to meet every point on that criteria. So if it falls outside of that criteria, then you may be successful in the application. So if it's not financially accessible to a wide range of people, then there may be other criteria that that event may meet. So you don't have to meet all of them.
Mr. Chair, I'd actually prefer, given we've got a workshop coming up that deals with exactly the issues around how we run our venues and Events 101 and what the composition is, and I think some of the questions that Councillor Courtney had before are really pertinent. I would actually prefer, personally, to deal with this particular item after we've done the workshop, because I think it directly relates to some of the questions we may have about how we run our events, what we're trying to achieve. I think Councillor McGurk raised a really good point around seasonality and whether that's something that we should be considering in terms of where we put things. And I guess the final point I'd just like to make, if you're willing to do that, is that one of the things that I find quite challenging is that when we hand over these funds to the NRDA, yes, they're set up to do it, but I have to say, when I turn up to Race Unity Day and those sorts of events and discover they're being sponsored by NRDA and not by Nelson City Council, I think we just need to be quite careful about whether it's the organisation that's setting the criteria or the organisations that's providing the fund that gets recognised for the sponsorship, because that money will have come directly out of ratepayer funds. And I think that is important, that this NRDA is a mechanism for these funds, they're not the economic development ones, and we need to be careful that we are it's important that ratepayers understand what it is that their ratepayer money is being used for. And by using the NCC, Nelson City Council, that's actually recognising the ratepayers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good point about in regards to when it comes to the labelling of who's providing and how and what. In regards to leaving it till after, any feedback from staff? I mean, I've felt this has been a good move to get this underway and put in, but is there any issues if we were to delay this? Councillor Noonan?
Maybe help. It is a recommendation to council. I can see the mayor's not comfortable with it coming. I think that you need to know the information that we obviously haven't got yet. Whether there's something the mayor wants to move in the meantime, but it can be changed at council.
Through you, Mr. I just really, given we've got some time today, I'd prefer to let this to lie on the table, have our workshop, come back, resume the meeting, and then do the decision. And then I think we've had a good chance to try and see it in context. I'm kind of looking at it seems like the smallest thing, it's $30,000. But $30,000, what it means is to the organisations that are coming in, it is make or break for them whether they actually come and have their event in Nelson City or they go out to another venue outside of the city. And given what we're trying to do is draw people, we said, what is our CBD? There's only one thing, people. It needs people. And so all of these funds are actually critical to city activation.
My concern is that we do need to get this decision today. I'd be comfortable if the rest of the committee were comfortable that we had the workshop and we came back in here and made the decision, I would be happy to do that, but I don't want it to be delayed after. If we can, and I'll just get advice from CEO, our staff, if you think we can do that. We have got a...
Look, if we can do it today, that's fine. My worry is if we don't make a decision today, then by the time we bring it back to another committee, half the year's gone, and the position I don't want to be in is staff, once again, having to make decisions about events without criteria and without having it above the line. So, look, if we can make progress at a workshop and then reopen the meeting and make a decision on it, that would be fine.
Okay. Thank you. So we just need to be smart about that. If we've got a couple of things to do, we just need to be pretty smart and efficient in regards to, but if I'm picking up there's a comfortability.
No. I'm not convinced that...
Councillor Courtney, I've just got, I haven't not allowed you guys to speak. I've got Councillor Barker, because I can see he's going to be giving us feedback. No, I'm getting some information back from you, get an idea if it's possible, and if there's a feeling about that. And I'm getting a few nods, but I've got Councillor Barker, and if there's no one else, I'll let you, Councillor Courtney, speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that I am not comfortable with this process. It's just not a good look to be breaking this meeting, going into a workshop, and then coming back to make the decision. It's not a good look in terms of transparency of our operation.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Picking up the point from Councillor McGurk over there, on the off-season and the time frame being March to November, 9 months, my concern really is it's a small amount of money. The challenge we've got is winter. And I'm kind of thinking why this is not May to October. If you're going to try and target some activity, that's when the challenge for everyone out there is. Why aren't we actually making that match that? I get the idea of the 9 months. So I'd like us to consider that. The next part was on the page 50 and item 4 down there that says supporting information, acknowledgement of the council. Now I'm kind of thinking that's really important. This happened with RAD when we try to get that going, get our acknowledgement out in the community as well. We do a lot of good stuff. And Nelson City Council don't actually get any credit for it. I think if someone's going to take their hand out and get some money, there's got to be some acknowledgement back to us. And I want that to be important for me. It also tells our ratepayers exactly what we're doing with their money. The other component there, which Mayor Rees mentioned on that item 4 about financially accessible, number one, I think there's two things covered here. Number one, if you're paying $150 for a ticket or more, I get that. She'll be subsidising it, I get that. The question is, item 5 there says, the event is primarily benefits the people of Nelson City. And if we think Nelson Tasman Chamber of Commerce benefits us, if we think the Cancer Society Ball benefits, if we think fundraising events benefit us, then I think that's going to get a pass. So I'm comfortable that those two do a nice counterbalance for each other. So I'm in favour of that staying in there, because the item 5 counterbalances it nicely. And I think myself, I want to get this, congratulate the staff for coming up with a criteria. We've been waiting one for a while, and the background data everyone mentioned before highlights we needed one. And I'm for moving this forward and getting it passed today.
Before the workshop.
Whatever you like, Mr. Chair, but it needs to be done today.
Yep, I agree. And comment on that, my concern is that, as Barker has raised, that I don't want to look like we are shaping something in a workshop for this decision. I believe this needs to be transparent. I'm very happy with the report, but I'm also happy to hear feedback on that. And it's also with this criteria, it's about best use of these facilities. Some of these events, we have got some very good facilities that are more appropriate for them to be in, rather than the Trafalgar. Sometimes there's a mindset that needs to be in the Trafalgar Centre, but we've got some great facilities, some greatly improved facilities. We've got some extra facilities with Green Meadows, etc. And that often that some of these events are better served in making use of our other facilities, not necessarily on the Trafalgar Centre. So time to take pause on that. Councillor Courtney and Councillor McGurk. Sorry, Councillor McGurk, do you have something after Courtney? Thank you.
I feel that this is an interim measure and it's got narrow scope, this particular item on the agenda. I'm not happy with it. It's a Band-Aid solution in my view, but it's needed. It's needed now.
Yeah.
Our management team need it now. I think we should just handle this and then get into the workshop later on, which is much wider. And even if we have the wider workshop, and then come back with this, I don't think we'll achieve anything or add anything more to this recommendation that's before us. I really don't. I think. Thank you for cutting.
Yes, I understand you. I'm just saying it.
No, I'm explaining to you why I think we should. Why we should.
Thank you. Councillor Rees, Madam Mayor Rees, Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look,
So I'm just after questions.
I'm really conscious of the fact that the workshop is noted in my papers as a confidential briefing. Now, obviously, one of the Chief Executive has considered that and felt there are matters in that are, and the reasons, I'm not sure what the reason is. I imagine it's because it deals with contractual matters, so it's commercial. So that's why it's in there. It's not a choice of, that's good practice around commercial matters, so I don't think there's any issue in there. But the problem I have is that it actually crosses over into a package, because the question you have to ask yourself is, are these fees set at the right level in the first place? And, those are the issues. If you see it as a Band-Aid matter, I'm actually, I'm never keen on doing Band-Aid solutions. I'm actually keen when we get round this table that we make a wise decision that has some endurance. But if council wants to do Band-Aids, then, that's the will of the committee, then they can do Band-Aids, but it's going to come up to a recommendation to council. And I would just have to come back to, I need to test Mr. Alsop a bit more on the issue of whether the Innisbrook Church Christmas in the City event would be excluded under this criteria, because I'm reading it and the answer was it wouldn't be, unlikely to be eligible, and I need to understand that, because that seems to me to be
Mr. Alsop, answer that now.
And the other issue I've got is when we talk about primarily for the benefit of people of Nelson City, that is not Nelson Tasman region, it is Nelson City. So could we get some clarity on that as well, because that influences events like the Nelson Tasman Chamber of Commerce event.
I'll get you answer the Innisbrook Church.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that the event you mentioned is actually open for the wider community, because you say it's more of a fair sort of event. So I don't see any reason why it would be ineligible.
So you've changed your mind on that. So before you said to us that you thought the Innisbrook one would be out?
No.
Unlikely.
To be fair, Madam Mayor, staff is that we've even included one that may fall under that. financials there, and your question to Mr. Allsop was maybe, more of a black and white, but just to flick through, maybe you've put him to a point where he couldn't explain each one for every single event, but those particular topics, and I thought he answered it fairly.
I wrote down the word unlikely.
So, through the chair, so the event there, you've got the Annesbrook Church, it just seems like that's just a straight out church service, as opposed to what you have explained as to probably being an event.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay.
A community event.
All right. Thank you.
Is that all, Madam Mayor? Thank you. Councillor Fulton?
Thank you, through the chair. Look, I concur that the mayor raises some interesting questions around criteria, and particularly, so the funding criteria focuses on events, and she made the point around if there was a conference, so let's say there was a conference on climate change, which was open to the public and it was ticketed and it was maybe $40 for people to come and have a conversation around climate change, would that be eligible in terms of it being access to a range of social, educational and recreational? So in the past we've had conferences declined for event funding, so we just want to make sure that that educational aspect is met within this criteria. So would it meet the criteria if it's called a conference rather than an event?
Through the chair, I think if you read in the eligibility, the conferences they're mentioned in there, so they would be considered to be ineligible. But as I say, every event, we don't want to be too restrictive on what's actually going to be available, so it had to be assessed case by case basis by the NRDA.
So, sorry, can you show me where it says that they would be ineligible?
Just point 2.
Page 51, point 2.
51, yeah, sorry.
I mean, a conferences doesn't have any commercial financial gain, it just covers its costs. So how would you, why are you saying that would make it ineligible? I'm looking for the word conference. I'm looking to see whether conferences are eligible or ineligible.
So perhaps
where that's defined within the word.
Perhaps I could answer that. On page 51, there is a heading, ineligibility. Number 2, conventions, conferences, trade shows and exhibitions. We've put conferences in there because most of them are run as a profit-making business. If you are uncomfortable with that, you can take conventions and conferences out of there. But the other issue we have is, as you've identified, $30,000 is not a lot of money. We were trying to make this last the whole year, which is why we split the year in two, because we didn't want to find we'd given away all the money in the first 4 or 5 months of the year, and then there was slim pickings for the second half of the year. That was the only reason.
Okay, so I would challenge that conferences, I would hope that conferences were non-profiting, that they were, the intention of a conference is to provide education to people. If we were having a plastic-free conference and how we can nationwide or move forward on being plastic-free, I would expect that the conference was covering the costs, not intended to profit. So I am concerned about that, and I think that when I think about holding events, I guess in many ways we've looked at this with things like the museum and the Suter Art Gallery as well. What we want is for people to use our space. We want people to go in and utilise our space and leave feeling like they have connected in some way. And we seem to often have the emphasis on connections within sports or connections within arts, which are two really important ways of connecting, but we can connect with learning too. And I think that we need to ensure that there are opportunities for people to connect in learning spaces. So I'm concerned that, I think that there's a huge difference between a...
I'll get Mr. Ball to make a comment on there, and I may add to that.
Through the chair, perhaps it would be helpful if we were to split out those two different kinds of conferencing approaches. As the Chief Executive says, there are many conference types which are definitely deliberately set up to make profit, and they're run by quite large companies. But perhaps under the criteria of things which would be inside and eligible, we could have something described as symposiums, conferences, which have an educational, social or community focus, not non-profit kind of in brackets. Is that the kind of concept that through the chair that we're aiming at. And yeah, the Mayor did mention symposiums earlier on. So perhaps if we were about to take a short break for a coffee stop through the chair, we could come up with that wording and get that adjusted to meet the needs.
Thank you for that. My quick comment here. I don't want to complicate what goes in and out of there because each outfit will have its own criteria, and as Mr. Allsworth pointed out, you may not necessarily tick every single box, but be considered on its eligibility. In regards to conference, etc., if you're doing it an educational thing, you wouldn't call it a conference, and if it wasn't as a commercial entity trying to promote their product, they would call it an educational so forth. It would be a church group doing it or a good organisation in Nelson providing that would be an educational, symposium or so forth. So a conference, it may be. I don't want us to get caught up into terminologies and words, but I take your point as far as people getting together and being learned and educating on a particular topic, might be climate change, etc., if that's what you're gaining there. I'm happy to have a tea break now, but before that, I do my concern is, and I'd like to see this, I'd like someone to move this, because I don't want us to go into a workshop, seem to doing something, making a decision there and then coming back to this. I don't see this as a band-aid at all. I see this as a tool that both the public have come to us, submitters have come to us, the committee have come to us, I've come to the staff on this, and so we need a tool to work through on this, and I think this is a very well put tool being used. And if we come out of our discussions on our briefing in regards to further ways we can add to these tools, by all means, but I don't want to lose this opportunity for this tool, and I don't see it as a band-aid at all. I'll take it moved by Councillor Delberg. Can I have a seconder for it, please? Seconded by Councillor McGurk.
Can I make a comment, Mr Chair? On page 49, it actually mentions Trafalgar Centre, then it mentions Community Hub, Stoke Hall. So that again is with the Community Services Group, so that group will get a comment when it goes to the council anyway. So I think there is an element of protection, and I think this is a whole lot better than what we had, and well done, staff.
Thank you. I'll put that to debate. So we had some questions.
Mr Chair, I thought I'd have a cup of tea because I'm quite interested in exploring the issue. Councillor Ford and I'm also very interested in seeing whether we could get a seasonality, whether the meeting had any interest in putting some seasonality weighting in there. Whether you want to test the meeting with it, just whether there's an interest in doing that.
Spare me, I'll just check with...
Yeah, it's just one of the criteria. We've got to...
Just check with staff if it's going to create a complication in regards to...
Thank you. Through the chair. I'm not sure about the seasonality thing. The reason is this fund isn't a proactive fund. It's not going out seeking to find and achieve. It is seeking to respond to. It's a reactive fund. So the main consideration from the officer point of view is that the money is available roughly evenly through the year, and past experience suggests that seasonality is not a huge driver in that for the kinds of groups that come forward which are community focused. That said, what we could do, because we are planning a review, is try it for the balance of the year and see if seasonality is a feature of the way it's worked and introduce that. But at the moment, as I say, it's designed as a reactive fund, but I'm in your hands. Thank you.
Mr Chair, the reason I'm raising it is because there are a range of factors in the discussion. Every one I've raised here, well, it's been a discussion, oh, well, that one, no, they wouldn't get on that one, but they get through on this one. And so there ends up being a bit of a weighting exercise around things. And I would have thought seasonality would have a positive effect because, again, what is the purpose of doing this? The purpose of doing this is to bring people into our venues, particularly our city venues, and seasonality is a factor that we've been trying to work with across everything else. It just seems inconsistent that this particular fund doesn't have any reference to seasonality. I'm not saying it's a defining factor, but from the discussion we've had, nothing's a defining factor in here.
What I'll do is we'll go for a cup of tea, but I'm conscious of time till 5 to 11. If I break to 5 to 11, I'll give a chance if you want to. We've had it moved and we had it seconded, so we'll have a cup of tea and I'll just chat with officers, and if you think there's a tweak needed in there in regards to conferences and seasonality, and if there's a an acceptance that's around the table, I'd like to get this moved and done. Thank you.
So the staff are going to bring back some words.
I've got some words on.
Thank you. So five I am conscious of the councillors will be also arriving for some of the briefings, etc. coming up, so we'd like to get this underway. Resuming the meeting. Thank you. We've had a couple of wordings changed to the criteria report. I'll let Mr. Ball outline that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I just take councillors to page 50 of your agenda, which is the criteria, and the proposal is to add a new number 8. And the wording, we don't have this on the screen, but the wording would say not-for-profit events which have an educational, social or community focus. And the intention there is to capture conferences, symposiums, gatherings, where it's obviously not a non-profit event. Ministry of Inspiration was given as an example in our discussions. And then over the page, under the heading of ineligibility, this is on page 51, number 2, we'd start that number 2 by saying non-commercially focused. So it would say non-commercially focused conventions, conferences, trade shows and exhibitions.
Ineligibility,
The ineligibility, yes.
you're going to say commercial, aren't you not?
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Yes, you are quite right. Commercially focused. Conventions, conferences, trade shows and exhibitions. And with those two changes, we are proposing a change in the recommendation, which is on the screen in front of you, in red. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I'll just check that the mover and seconder are happy with that.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Just refreshing repeat the criteria for the new paragraph 8. What was the criteria?
Thank you, through the chair. Not-for-profit events which have an educational, social or community focus.
This is for eligibility.
Which is, yeah, eligible.
Is that after number 6?
New number.
New number 8.
On page 50.
Bottom of the page.
Is this on page 3? I do need to double check where you're
Page
putting it.
page 50, which is the eligibility document, criteria document.
Okay, so why is it not included in the funding criteria, which has got 1 to 6? I mean, why have we not put some additional words in there? Because that's where I would have thought, I mean, the funding criteria, that is the criteria where you're meeting it. So why is the additional words not being put in that section where we've got a number 7 or where the,
Thank you through the chair. Yes, I accept that. It should be a new number 7 under the criteria. So it's still on page 50, immediately above the subheading supporting information. So it is part of the funding criteria.
great, thank you. So it will be a new number 7.
I agree that's a better place for it. That's, once again, mover and seconder are happy with that? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank that. So we've moved and seconded for both receiving the report and that recommendation goes to council. Is there any debate on that? No. Councillor Barker.
Happy to go with it, but I still see danger signs there there's some grey areas of interpretation when it comes up, and I think that worries me. There'll be people that will try and push.
Keep in mind, as officers pointed out, that they don't necessarily have to tick every single box, but when they tick boxes, then they'll be assessed on the eligibility.
I can anticipate problems, Mr. Chairman.
Human trust on that. Thanks, Councillor Ford, but I will move in the debate. Is this debate?
Yeah, I'm debating.
Okay.
I'm going to speak in support of this. I think that those changes are really important to make, and I thank the officers for taking the time to think about how we can be inclusive towards organisations or community groups which might be wanting to hold an event or a conference which is primarily focused on learning and sharing knowledge. I think it's really important that we utilise this space for sharing knowledge throughout our community. In terms of the supporting information, I note that the applicants will be asked to provide information alongside the application, and I would like to think, and I understand it is all slightly grey, but I would like to think that the stronger the application in terms of the environmental considerations, that those are the kinds of events or conferences that we want to be held in that space as well. So particularly around waste minimisation, so aiming for zero waste, so that when events are held in that space, they showcase the kind of city that we want to be in terms of zero, particularly in terms of zero waste into the future. Having been to a couple of events there which are not zero waste, I think it's important that we put that really high up and try to commit to all council facilities aspiring to have zero waste events there.
Thank you, Councillor Fordham. Any further debate? I'll put it. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you for your input on that. That moves us, I believe that's the last item for public. We're about to move into public excluded. The reasons being as noted, but also, which should be missed off, additional reason for going into public excluded on this topic, section 7(2)G, the withholding of information is necessary to maintain legal professional privilege. It's moved. Ms. Councillor Walker, seconded. Any debate? Carried. So we got moved by Walker, seconded by McGurk. Let's move into public excluded. Thank you.